Hey, welcome. We're going to get after Westward Expansion today in U.S. history. So let's sit down and get after that a bit. Move this out of my way. All right. So chapter 17 is going to deal with Westward Expansion. Chapter 16 dealt with Reconstruction of the South. And so, just like if you would take in the previous class and we dealt with sectionalism. We're still dealing with sectionalism to a certain extent. The Northeast, you have in the Northeast, you have a lot of factories and industrialization. In the South, you have the period of Reconstruction. In the West, you have this period of Westward Expansion. And so Westward expansion is nothing new in American history. If you look at this, when in 1783, when America wins its independence from Great Britain, more or less, America is all the lands east of the Mississippi without Florida. We'll fight the War of 1812 to gain greater control of the Midwest. Then in 1803, we purchased the Louisiana Purchase from France. In 1821, we purchased Florida from Spain. 1845, Texas is annexed from Mexico. 1846, we have the compromise that allows us, the United States, to claim Oregon and Washington and Idaho, and the British to maintain control of British Columbia. And then in 1848, we have the Mexican-American War that's going to provide America with California and Nevada and the Southwest. And then in 53, we finish off this little bit by purchasing that bit from Mexico. And so, you see America growing westward as time goes on. And you see this painting here, which is a famous painting. It'll be part of maybe one of your assignments, where we look at Westward Expansion. This is called The Spirit of America, or Westward Expansion, or Manifest Destiny, in which you have the Spirit of the West, I think is actually the name of the painting. You have dawn in the east, light in the east, darkness in the west. Everything that's over here is more savage. I suppose you have wild animals and native people. And then, you have the conquest of Western society, or American society, moving westward during this time frame through railroads and stagecoaches and mountain men and wagon trains. And we have Columbia here floating through the air, bringing the telegraph and communication lines and education and schools. And we see, we see the homestead here. And so you have lots of different things happening in this painting. So before the mid 1800s, it was believed that this big section of America here in the middle was kind of unfit for human settlement. Kansas was dry during, had gone through a dry patch during the exploration of Lewis and Clark and Xavier Pike and those people. And so there wasn't a whole lot of excitement about settling into the Great Plains. However, as the railroads began to move westward past Missouri and past St. Louis and past Independence and into Kansas and Nebraska, as they worked towards connecting the East Coast and the West Coast, you have a lot of people looking around like, hey, this might be some good land to settle in. So the railroad really starts to be this promise of Western settlement. As the railroads expand westward, the government gives them land on both sides of the tracks, and people begin to the railroad begins to sell that land, and people begin to move into the American West. Oh, goodness. All right. The West represents a lot of things to many, many different people. Some people look at this as the promise of democracy, as more land is going to become available for more people to own, and more people are going to have this opportunity to be self-reliant. There's also going to be economic resources that are available in the West that were there. It's a way to spread religion to the natives. We can harvest trees, we can mine, for precious metals and oil and all those things. And so the West is going to offer all this stuff, right? The thing is, when we look at this, you're going to have, it's not like this land isn't uninhabited. And so you're going to have you're going to have lots of different non-white groups in the American West, and we're going to chat about them for just a second. Okay, this idea of westward expansion, or of this empire from coast to coast, is part of this larger idea called manifest destiny, in which Americans believe that, hey, they were ordained by God to have this ocean to ocean empire. Right. And we're going to go out and we're going to spread the Protestant institutions of schools, and then those Protestant values of hard work and thrift and piety, and improvements in the land. And we're going to make everything produce the way that we're used to. And while this goal is somewhat noble, the methods really aren't. We're going to be very cruel to the Native American people. We're going to be very selfish with our relations with Asian Americans that we encourage to move to America. And then the Hispanic people that have lived in this area for centuries, goodness, are going to be just kind of shoved aside. To begin with, in the late 1840s, we're going to start to 1830s, 1840s, we're going to start to see the growth of the wagon train, and people are going to start moving west via wagon train as America settles into Oregon and Washington State. These are temperate climates that are very good for farming, and so more and more people are going to start to travel these Oregon trails and the Santa Fe trails and the California trails out to settle. The Oregon Trail and the California Trail specifically are settlement trails. The Santa Fe Trail is a trail of commerce where goods from the Mississippi River Valley, Mississippi River region are going to be transported to Santa Fe, New Mexico, to be traded with Spanish traders during this time frame. So thousands of Americans are going to make their way west. And then we do that, and we can get a look at some of the trails here. The Santa Fe Trail, typically almost always commerce. You would take your wagon from Independence to Santa Fe, and typically in Santa Fe, you would burn your wagon or sell it or strip it apart for whatever for money if you could sell it, and then you would come back and then just do the same thing over and over again. The Oregon Trail goes here. The California Trail splits off here in the green. The Mormon Trail, when the Mormons relocate, they end up in Salt Lake City, and they're part of this westward expansion too, although they're not going to fit our story right now. Another element that's going to help westward expansion and westward settlement is going to be the Homestead Act. In 1862, President Lincoln passes what's referred to as the Homestead Act. It's going to give every man or woman 160 free acres of land if that land is improved. If you're 21 or older and you're willing to move out there. And this was really a movement to ensure that the Union is going to have hold of the American West. In 1862 is right in the middle of the Civil War. In 1862, the war is not going well for the Union. And Lincoln's very concerned about, the spread of slavery into the American West. And so, like, if we don't fill up these lands with citizens of the United States, well, then what could happen? And so, Kansas, Nebraska, those types of states, the Dakotas become destination places for folks due to free land. And we get a look here at some of the homesteaders here. And then we have the railroads. During the Civil War in 1862, we passed funding to build a transcontinental railroad. We're going to connect the Union Pacific from Omaha to the Central Pacific in Sacramento. And the government is going to provide capital and resources to the private industry railroads that are going to build this train. And otherwise, it wasn't going to get done. Railroads would take these land grants that the government would give them and sell those lands to settlers. In 1869, in Utah, Promontory Point in Utah, the nation is connected, and now we can get resources from the east to the west. And so we have the train that goes from New York to Chicago through Omaha, out to the west, out to Sacramento, and then we have a rail line that connects New Orleans to San Francisco. And so now all of a sudden our major port cities are connected. I'm going to ask you to go through and watch this video about Chinese labor, and that's pretty important. The forts that are going to be created during the American Western settlement are going to be for numerous different reasons. You're going to have some forts that are going to have just trading posts. You're going to have some that are like drought relief or protection on some of these trails that are going to go through, like the Santa Fe Trail or the Oregon Trail. Fort Laramie in Montana was more for Indian protection from Native Americans because of the Native American population in Wyoming and Montana. We have Navy ports in California that are going to help with trade. Who's coming out to settle in the West? Well, you're going to have whites from the East. You're also going to have Asians that are going to come over and help build the railroad across. You're going to have Hispanic people that have been there for centuries, or maybe just moving into the American West and Southwest at that time. Recently freed African Americans from the South or African Americans from the North. And then you're also going to start to see Northern Europeans moving in, like Germans and Swedish and the Irish are going to come in to the upper Midwest and into the Midwest, into the Great Plains with the promise of free land. So what's life like? It's pretty hard. There's little lumber. The weather is miserable. You have horrible heat. You have horrible winters. You have hail and drought and plagues of grasshoppers and you borrow money to buy farm equipment, or you borrow money to build a home or any of that stuff, and then you have to pay it back. And probably just the biggest thing in the American West is just going to be boredom. You're going to be a long way from your neighbors, and there's not going to be a lot going on, and that's going to cause some problems. It's not always like doom and gloom, because there's going to be some excitement. You're going to start to see the birth of cattle drives as railroads move further and further west. Some entrepreneurial cowboys take on the responsibility of driving large herds of cattle from Texas, where you can buy cows really, really cheap, and allowing them to graze through Texas, through Oklahoma, through southern Kansas, and driving these cattle into places like Abilene or Dodge City or Ellsworth, Kansas, and putting them on trains and shipping them to Chicago. And so the cowboys that come in, they can make lots of money selling the cattle, and the beef packers turn profit as they sell their goods there too as well. With the invention of the barbed wire fence, open plain grazing comes to an end. We're going to have a gold rush and a silver rush out in the West. California is going to have gold. Nevada is going to have silver. Lots of people are going to move out there and hunts for trying to strike it rich, and they're going to find out that, hey, not everybody's going to get rich, and so a lot of people are going to just move out to the West and start new lives, and we're going to see populations grow that way. One of the population groups that had been around was the Native American population. Native Americans and settlers and Europeans had really been in conflict since the early 1600s. As Americans began to push further and further and further into North America. By 1830, the United States ordered all Native Americans removed west or east. All Native Americans living east of the Mississippi River were removed to west of the Mississippi River. And so by the 1860s, 1870s, about 250,000 Native Americans are living in what we would refer to as American West. And the American government tries to deal with them through diplomatic methods. The first one is going to be just like treaties. We're going to try to negotiate as many treaties as we can. One of the more famous is the first treaty of Fort Laramie, which is going to create a border over what we're going to refer to as Indian lands, or at least like with the Lakota Indians. And we're going to promise them $50,000 a year for various tribes, and promise that settlers wouldn't encroach on Native American lands. The problem here is, all right, we can see that there, is that you're going to have the Oregon Trail that goes right along the edge of that, and people are going to be like, hey, this looks like a good place to live. And so more and more white settlers are going to move into lands that are controlled by the Lakota Nation, and that's going to cause problems. The second problem is going to be the fact that the American government's a little bit corrupt, and and all that money that was promised to the Native American tribes isn't necessarily going to get there. And so the settlers would use violence to relocate the Native Americans, and money's not coming. People are sitting on their land. In the Lakota tribes are very upset. So in 1862, we have a group of Native Americans that take up arms against the settlers, and they kill about 1,000 settlers that had moved into their lands. And so that's going to cause the United States military to come in, restore order. 38 of the Dakota leaders are going to be executed in what's going to be the largest mass execution in U.S. history. In Colorado, the Native Americans had also taken up arms, and there had been fighting, although it's a little bit more peaceful. One of the tribes that had reached a peace agreement with the government lived on the Sand Creek Reservation, and one day in the 1860s, you have a group of white settlers that attack the Native American settlement there and kill over 100 Native Americans, mostly women and children. And so you have the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864. You have the and then we have the Lakota area up in here. Congress had hoped to stop this violence, and so with a new series of treaties, we have the Second Treaty of Fort Laramie, and then we have the Treaty of Medicine Lodge that happens here in Kansas. The Second Treaty of Fort Laramie basically just reduces the amount of land that the Native Americans have in Wyoming and South Dakota, and they move this Lakota tribe into the Black Hills of South Dakota. The Medicine Lodge Treaty relocates a number of tribes into the Native American territory. Then shortly afterwards, in 1875, we find gold in the Black Hills in South Dakota, and so the American government further alters this agreement with the Lakota and Dakota tribes and moves them onto even smaller reservations. And so we can see this. Here we go, 1867. You have all this area in the green, and then over time, the land gets lost, and so. And today it's just this mauve colors, the Indian reservations, Native American reservations. Sand Creek Massacre, very similar. You have all this land that was one time there. It was for the Native American settlers, and then it gets shrunk down. And then the Cherokee are moved to Oklahoma. I'm sorry, the Cherokee came from South Carolina. The Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Apache all get moved down into southwestern Oklahoma. The high point for the Native Americans probably is the Battle of Little Bighorn. It happens on June 25th, 1867, in which General George Custer attacks a major group of Native American warriors that were led by Sitting Bull in Montana along the Little Bighorn River. And he and his army are basically wiped out. I think there's one survivor that goes on to tell the story. But there's over 260 American deaths, and this is the largest loss in a single battle of the Native American Wars or the Indian Wars. And Sitting Bull and the remaining natives, the remaining natives involved in this flee to Canada, trying to avoid reprisal from the American government. Little Bighorn happens here right on the edge of Montana and Wyoming. And we have a famous painting of Custer's last stand here. Okay. By 1890, almost all the native tribes have been moved into reservations, and you can see with the mustard-colored areas on the map, those are Native American reservations, and most of them are still somewhat intact today. In 1890, we have the last major atrocity, well, one of the last major atrocities against the Native American people carried out by the American government. The Lakota that were on the reservation, and which was supposed to be like their sovereign land, were practicing a new form of religion called the Ghost Dance, in which they were basically asking for a messiah to come out and relead their nation to greatness. The whites in the area were pretty fearful of what was happening, and so the army comes in, and there's some skirmish, and the army ends up killing about 300 Native Americans at the massacre of Wounded Knee in 1890. And you can see here there's some pictures of the mass graves that are dug for the Native Americans. Okay, after 1890, the government begins in this Americanization process where we're trying to basically remove children from the reservation, teach them to speak English, try to instill Protestant values in this Native population. And then reservations are also broken up from communal land into individual land holdings, which is a more of a American idea of private ownership. And so the Native Americans are really going to lose their way of land and connection to their past and their culture because of interactions with the American government. The Chinese, who are really, really encouraged to move to America to build the Transcontinental Railroad, after that railroad is completed in 1869, are going to face discrimination. In 1879, the Chinese are forbidden citizenship within the United States, also denied citizenship in the state of California. In 1882, America passes the Chinese Exclusion Act that prevents further immigration of individuals from China to the United States. And so a lot of these Chinese immigrants are going to bond together in ethnic enclaves and form like small little communities they're still around today, like in Chinatown and San Francisco, to protect themselves. Hispanics are going to see their lives changed too by Westward Expansion. The first thing is going to be that they're going to be offered American citizenship by the Treaty of Guadalupe that brought to an end the Mexican-American War. But yeah, they're still going to face problems with land ownership and loss of rights. And so the Spanish or the Hispanics are going to form their own groups called Ligora Blancas, which means the white hats, and they're going to try to fight for some of their property rights. They have very limited success in violence, but they do have some success with politics. And so, like, if they can and legal efforts in the courts to preserve some of their rights. And so as New Mexico started to approach statehood, there was some legislation that was put in place to try to limit Hispanic political activism, and we ran into and they run into some discrimination in those ways. Okay, so that's a real quick overview of chapter 17. Hopefully, you guys are reading the textbook and have any questions, reach out to me. But we'll see you next time.